Welcome to the SoCal Car Scene Podcast, the exclusive place for coverage of car culture in Southern California and the personalities that drive it. I'm your co-host, Big J Marash. This show is associated with SoCal Classic Car Storage, which provides South OC car lovers the opportunity to secure their vehicles in an environment made just for them. Our two facilities feature advanced security systems, 24-hour video surveillance, and a dedicated members lounge. In addition to storage, our expert sales staff offers consignment services for those looking to sell their cars. For more information, visit us at our Laguna Hills location or at SoCalCarStorage.com or on Facebook at Facebook.com/SoCalCarStorage. And now, without further ado, here is your host of the SoCal Car Scene Podcast, Dean Marash. Take it away, Dean.
Thanks, Jay, and welcome everybody to the SoCal Car Scene Podcast. That's right, I'm your host, Dean Marash, and we're really pumped up to have as our very special guest today, Derek Hill. Derek is a Santa Monica native and comes from an automotive family whose automotive presence has been felt around the world. He's the son of America's first world driving champion, Phil Hill. Derek most recently was a stunt driver for the incredible Ford versus Ferrari movie. Derek also pursued this driving and racing career in motorsports for over 10 years, taking class wins in Daytona 24 hours, Sebring 12 hours, and many other, I'm going to do it again, and many others driving for the Factory 5 BMW M3 team. He is managing his father's archive for 15 years and has published books and is working on a documentary about his father's incredible life. He's also a judge in the Master Ceremony at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance. He's an active vintage racer, participating in the Le Mans Classics, Goodwood Revival, and the Rolex Monterey Motorsports Reunion. Thanks for joining us on the SoCal Car Scene Podcast, Derek.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. Let's fire these engines up. Derek, before we get into your incredible automotive background, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, right? So how are you and your family doing these difficult times? I understand you're hanging with the family a lot lately, like so many.
I sure am, but at the same time, I had some business to be taken care of. The home that I grew up in, Santa Monica, is where my mom kind of spends 50% of her time. But with this whole lockdown, she has had to pretty much stay home up here where I live with my family up in Ojai. She has her own place, but it's been an excuse for my mother, who's a very much a busybody at 82 years old, to stay home and allow me to take care of getting the house ready for whether we lease it or sell it or whatnot. And this is a house that has been in the family since the 1920s. So, with my father's lifetime in automobiles and his collecting hobby and all of it, there has just been an absolute ton to go through and sort through, but it's all pretty much been taken care of in these last couple of months. With the highways empty, I have been one of the few out there making the trip back and forth to LA, and I would have to say, in my personal life, it's been essential business, and it's been good though to spend a lot more time with the family and with the kids at this age they're at.
Well, we can really appreciate what you're going through with your family's heirlooms and lifetime of memories. My sisters and I and the rest of my family, we had to do the same thing when we sold and our estates for my parents. And it's great that you have the time to do it carefully and thoughtfully. When life is rolling 24/7, it's hard to make that time. There's millions of little decisions. I can imagine what you're going through.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's tough for my mother, who has lived in that house for probably 40, 50 years. And, so it's not easy. It's not easy for people to make these big changes, but, sometimes a crisis is when these big changes happen. And, so, it's really unfortunate to see what's going on out there in the world. We're all in the same boat,
Right.
but you just have to do what you got to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad everybody's healthy and the families are coming together. Jay and I were talking about what are the best things about this, and I think the biggest thing is that families are getting to know one another, spending time with each other, and hopefully that's a good thing. I know it is for our family, but and your family, which is great.
Absolutely. Well, with a 1 and a 3-year-old, I can't say it's changed a whole lot because you're all at home so much together anyhow.
Yeah, right.
And both my wife and I work. We're self-employed. We work from home often, so our lives haven't changed a whole lot. But we're just fortunate that it hasn't turned our lives upside down like I know it has to so many.
Right.
And we just hope we can all get back to normal sooner than later.
You're the master of ceremony for the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance in Monterey. Unfortunately, we heard that event was canceled due to COVID-19. It really hurts us car guys. Feels like blasphemy. What's been your reaction with a significant role in that show?
Yeah, it truly has rocked the car world and everyone involved in putting on the event. I would say more so the team is my experience that has gotten most affected by this. Of course, we all in the car world look forward to that week in August every year. It just is one of those things I've been doing my whole life in one capacity or another. And you didn't want to believe it at first that right. This pandemic could affect us all the way to August. But then when you start to realize how much preparation goes into all the cars getting ready and the participants having to, book travel arrangements coming from all over the world and shipping cars from all over the world, and sponsors, primarily sponsors who are pulling back right now with all the economic turmoil. Yep. It's really it's something that you realize. Okay, it makes sense. That it's getting canceled, but at the same time, I was just speaking with some people on the team today who are essentially out of a job because of it. Who've been working for years on the Concours, and that's really sad. It's it affects people's personal lives a lot. But I hope that that we'll come to a place within this year where we can confidently look forward to 2021, because these one-day events they're risky, I guess. That's what the current picture kind of shines a light on.
Sure does. How
much goes into that one day a year, and of course, events go on year after year after year. But when something like this comes into play, it's certainly a shock. Certainly a shock, and I hope we'll get through it soon.
Oh, I think we will. Selfishly, it's been on our bucket list. I haven't been there. Jay hasn't been there. Some of the folks that work with us, and we had it all planned out this year. One of our customers we're selling a car for, and our plan was if it doesn't sell, he lives in Monterey, right on the drive. No worries. We got an extra house for you to hang out in. We're like, got this plan. We're going to sell that car. It's all going to be good. Well, next year. No problem.
Right.
Next year. We'll see you in action next year. We can't wait. So let's talk a little bit about your growing up experience. We're all, we've all been involved in cars. It seems like most of us car people for almost our entire lives. And you're currently living up in Ventura County, but Santa Monica is where you grew up, if I'm not mistaken. And is that where you were first exposed to this awesome car lifestyle with your father, Phil?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I grew up with the biggest garage in Santa Monica. The lots aren't very big in the neighborhood I grew up in, but my father certainly maxed out the amount of room that he could build on. I guess back before strict building codes. And so, in a neighborhood that had 2-car garages, we had a 9-car garage. And that's where my father started his restoration business after he retired from racing. So it was normal to just go out in the backyard and step into this other world of all the cars and it, everything about it. It had a machine shop and a really good sort of workbench area to sort of handle anything to work on the old cars. And, years of restoration materials and whatnot. So it was like, growing up with all the sensory input of being around the classic cars.
What I bet you were everybody's favorite friend when you were growing up? Like, hey, can we come over to your house and check out the cars? We'll help out.
Yeah.
Did you get a lot of that?
I did, to a point. I'll have to say, my father's interests were very, I'd say, eclectic, or he was almost a car eccentric, in the sense that his love for automobiles were the pre-war classic American cars. So the early Packards and Pierce Arrows and locomobiles, and that was the era that he sort of romanticized and always loved, even throughout the years that he was racing. And so these cars, even when I was in elementary school in the 1980s, I mean, they even seemed so old back then.
I bet.
So it wasn't the easiest thing for my friends or us to relate to.
Yeah. You guys wanted, what were you guys wanting to see? Were you post-muscle cars? Were your friends into the 70s and 80s? What were the cars you guys coveted?
Well, gosh, I really wish I could say that I grew up in a car culture of car obsessed kids, like you kind of think is normal everywhere. But maybe growing up on the west side of LA, it was more honestly about what were the current great cars, and growing up in that period was the whole fascination with supercars. And so, we were intrigued with the latest Ferrari, like F40, the Bugatti EB110 was kind of mind blowing. Seeing what McLaren was coming out with, and it was kind of the cars pushing that 200 mile an hour barrier. The Porsche 959, those were the cars that kind of really got us excited. And you saw posters up in kids' rooms and whatnot. I, on the other hand, had this whole other inside look at classic cars and antiques, because every summer I was going to Pebble Beach. My father was taking the family and us up to this car tour up in Modoc County, where you'd get a lot of sort of pre-1920 cars all traveling around together for 3 or 4 days, which was so much fun. I absolutely loved it. But none of my friends really could relate to what I was doing.
No, of course not.
So
yeah, but I think one of the people that's still on TV that seems to really be in line with what your father was passionate about is Wayne Carini. One of the reasons why I like watching his show is he's chasing cars from that era. I think he just recently sold a Pierce Arrow, and he loves Packards, and it's just a glimpse into the amazing coach built cars of the past and how incredible they were. It's like you. It's not my thing, but you can understand how people get so consumed because they're so incredibly well built and handcrafted.
Oh, absolutely. And not only that, I would say from just an experiential standpoint, there's nothing quite like being in these early open cars when you're driving on beautiful roads, remotely, because it's like being on a motorcycle. You actually can smell the fields of whatever is going on around you. You're really taking in the environment around you, and there's this really, really interesting connection to the car itself, where you can hear the gears, the straight cut gears. And whenever I get in an old car and I hear the gearbox, and going through the gears, it just brings me right back to those great memories. And there's something about those early cars that if people were just more exposed to them, I guarantee, they would have way more interest to younger collectors.
Yeah. It's just, we've got a guy here that's got a 1913 J Model T, and he shows us how to start it. He's taken both Jay and I for rides around the block, and it's a lot of work to start and to keep running, and there's pedals everywhere and there's spark adjust and
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's fun, man.
Isn't that fun,
Those
Jay?
cars are the best. You won't feel like 50 miles per hour on a Model T is way different than 50 miles per hour on any other car.
I think that's going down like a 30% incline,
Right.
On your bicycle tires, man.
Yeah.
You could put a baseball card in the spokes and have
there
it
you go.
sound even cooler.
It's so true, though, that you will come back from a day of touring in those cars absolutely exhausted, but in a good kind of way, because you're dealing with all the elements and you're really having to stay focused on the driving experience.
So was your dad's racing car endeavors in these garages as well, or was that somewhere else? Was it a mix of that kind of stuff for you, or did he have kind of a shop where all that serious work was being done?
Oh, no. Okay, so my dad had me, I was born in 1975, and my father retired from motor racing in 1967, to put it into perspective.
No kidding. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So my father had me, I guess, rather later in life, at 48 years old. So he was already on to his whole next phase of life, which was car restoration.
Right.
Don't even get me started about were there race cars in the garage, because how I wish, when I think about the cars that he owned and that he raced, he wouldn't have had to worry about his retirement accounts and whatnot if he thought about collecting cars that he actually raced.
Dan Gurney kept most of his, because I was at that grand opening at the Peterson. What was that, a year and a half ago before he passed? And that was quite a collection. I'm so blown away at the way they were able to preserve so many of those cars from his legacy. But your father didn't have that opportunity, or just, it didn't present itself? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't think he ever thought of or cared to own a Ferrari or whatnot that he had raced and was no longer competitive. He early on he owned things like Jaguar XK120. He sold that to buy an 8C Alpha, which he raced for a couple of years. He sold that to buy his first Ferrari. But as soon as the car wasn't competitive, he sold it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about it being an investment, he was around when Enzo Ferrari offered him a 250 GTO when they were piling up the inventory behind the factory in Maranello, and they all thought Enzo was trying to pull a fast one on him, trying to sell off these older, no longer competitive cars,
Junky Ferrari GTOs.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, what a story. So your dad, of course, I could rattle off a bunch of his successes, but you know it better than I do. Wasn't he the first American to win the Formula One Drivers' Championship?
Yes, he was. Yeah, 1961.
And was he the only one as well?
Well, Mario Andretti technically is, the second guy, second American to win a Formula One championship. And of course, Mario is a household name. And a lot of people don't even realize that, because he had such a stellar career in so many areas of racing. But my father did that quite a few years before Mario did. And back in an era when, they weren't televised around the world, there was very limited media and information to get right away, and it certainly wasn't a big deal in the U.S. They might have had, on the second or third page of the sports section might have covered a paragraph about what happened in a race a few weeks ago or something.
No kidding. Yeah, compare that to Formula One fan groups today. They're rabid. You just watch them at the racetrack during, before, after. I don't.
Yeah.
It's hard to find a more involved fan base than Formula One.
Absolutely, and having the Netflix series Drive to Survive out there has done more for Formula One than almost the racing itself to introduce it to the general public. Because I talk to more people who aren't Formula One fans who absolutely love that series, and I recommend it to anyone listening to this.
Count me in. I'm ready for season 3. That was this season. Season 2 was so awesome because we got to the teams that were on the top of the leaderboard. Mercedes Benz and Ferrari and Red Bull. We're just getting to see the inside of these teams and how they work and all that. Begs one question: is it possible to do what your father, Dan Gurney, and some of these other drivers did in the old days, where they'd go from one car to another car, or seemingly go from one series to a different series, different weekends? Is that no longer possible? Is that a thing of the past?
Well, I would say it's also because their schedule nowadays is so much bigger of a commitment to that series. I mean, the quantity of races. I think in my father's championship year, there were 8 Formula One races. So
Really?
they had a lot of time in their schedule to do other things. And so, simultaneously, my father was a factory sports car driver, racing the Targa Florio and Sebring and Daytona and Le Mans 24 hours. So, even the Formula One drivers back then had time to do the Indy 500.
Right. Exactly.
So it was a different time with a lot less races on the schedule. And nowadays, I mean, yeah, we would love to see Formula One drivers doing the 24 hours of Le Mans or coming over to do some IndyCar races or whatnot. But
The ones that intrigue me and some of my customers are Trans Am, where guys like Gurney and, Shelby and all these others would find the time to get involved in these American manufacturer race series. Very cool stuff.
yeah,
I think that went by the wayside, but boy, sure like to see something like that come back.
right. Well, back then too, it was Formula One drivers were chasing the money. They weren't getting paid a whole lot to be doing what they were doing. So if it meant getting some prize money or starting money in different series, I guarantee they'd be traveling anywhere in the world to find the prize money.
Wow, it's a totally different time. So, with your dad's incredible race experience, when did you get the bug to jump in a race car? Where that
Oh,
was?
well, I'd say it was at a very early age. I couldn't tell you exactly when. It was just that I grew up around a lot of photos of race cars and pictures of that around the house, and my father was still avidly watching Formula One races. So I was growing up, getting up early on Sunday mornings, watching the races, and of course traveling to races with my father, where he was still being honored and exposed to it through, like, the Long Beach Grand Prix was always an annual event. And so I was going to the Long Beach Grand Prix since I was maybe 3 years old.
Okay.
Back when it was Formula One. And so
That's right. It was Formula One.
yeah. So from what my mom tells me, they were taking me on the pit lane, and my father was talking to the Ferrari mechanics, some of which were his mechanics, and introducing the family to them. And so I just remember the cars being way too loud for my liking at that young age. But when you're around it, I always feel like, what little boy isn't absolutely in love with cars and racing? And even little girls, like I'm seeing with my 1-year-old daughter, she's already obsessed.
She's got the bug. All right.
Well, I think so.
That is awesome. I spent my formative years up in Northern California, and I moved to SoCal to pursue a career after college. And I came down here, and the first thing that kind of attracted me like a magnet was Long Beach Grand Prix. And um, I'd never really been to other than dirt track races up in NorCal. And when I found that race, I said, I raised my hand. I said, I'm a volunteer. I didn't know anybody. I didn't really have friends down here. And I was like, but that was one of the first things I did is I became a volunteer for that race. I think I did it 3 or 4 years in a row. And what a great experience. And when you get that close to cars and the pits and the drivers and all these things, I don't know, there's just no way to escape. There's no going back.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, and I think that it was more the frustration of going to these races and the historics in Monterey, and being so aware of it. But as a youngster, you can't really get involved as much as you'd like to in getting behind the wheel. And so once that moment in your life happens, where for me it was stepping into go-karts and starting with racing go-karts at age 16, that's when it really started to come to life. That's when you really want to get after it, and you almost can't get enough.
So 16, were you bugging your dad to start it earlier? Did they tap the brakes on you, or what did it take for that to happen? I mean, karting is just such a big thing now. You see kids getting involved, when they're 5 or 6 or just right out of their diapers. It seems crazy these days.
Oh, I know. Yeah, no, and my father never pushed me, or I don't think really wanted me to get involved, frankly, in motor racing. Just from what his whole experience was in such a dangerous era, I think it just wasn't something he wished for his son. But I have to say, once I started showing an interest in it, with some friends of ours down in San Diego who got me involved in their karting region. That's when he was comfortable with them helping out and me being a part of that scene. But I really did it all on my own. I traveled down there. I'd stay with our friends, all on my own, and my father would come to some races, but he wasn't trying to outwardly endorse it until. It wasn't until I came back from my first year in college, for the Thanksgiving break. So early on in my first year of college is when I decided, after this year of school, I'm gonna dedicate my time fully to being a racing driver. And I just said, frankly, whether you're gonna help me or not, this is what I want to do. And it was just at the time my father closed his doors to the restoration business in the late 90s. And so he kind of had a wide open schedule. And that's when we really, it was perfect timing. We really had a few years of bonding that was very special.
So, you mentioned that how unsafe driving was in the, your father's era, 60s, 70s. I'm assuming that's when he raced. But I've watched some of the films, and it's outright shocking between how unsafe the racetracks were, the cars, the conditions. But it almost felt like anything else where, they made the sacrifices. So today's race car drivers, cars can come apart at 200 miles an hour and walk out of those cars. And we see it, whether it's in NASCAR or open wheel. And I feel like, they made tremendous sacrifice. So I don't blame your father at all. Must have taken incredible just willpower to overcome the fear factor back then.
Yes. Yeah, well, I also think the mentality was much different. I mean, they weren't too far past World War II when millions of people lost their lives.
Right.
And it was a very common thing to just live with much higher risk and not to treat death quite the same way that we do now. And but from a personal standpoint, my father, he didn't want to die in a race car. I mean, I don't think anyone did, but so many did perish, and and kind of drove almost with a sense of the fact that they would die one day in a car. It was just a whole different mentality.
Right. Yeah. Thank God your father survived and flourished and was successful. And but so tell us now, you had a lot of success for a number of years. I know you were involved in the Ferrari Challenge, the Formula Dodge, the Barber Dodge Pro Series, and then ultimately in the Formula 3000. Um, you know, it sounds to me that you were really working your way up, and you were just nipping at the door of Formula One, and it looked like you were kind of on your way. But tell us about that experience and that chapter of your life. I mean, what's your takeaway?
Well, I just feel that if I was gone tomorrow, I could feel I lived a full life in cars, because being able to race for the better part of 10 years and be on tracks, first in North America, where I had a great time climbing the ranks over here, winning some local regional championships in California, moving up into the Barber Dodge Pro Series that would get us at events supporting Indy cars or Trans Am. And then, from there going to Toyota Atlantics, which are such great cars, with so much downforce, and getting to race at the Long Beach Grand Prix was like a dream come true, to be racing in a support series. Of course, the first Long Beach Grand Prix I did, it was one of those years that it was raining so hard that in my Toyota Atlantic race, I could not even see 5 feet in front of me. And it was sort of terrifying, but I just stayed out of trouble and went from like 9th on the grid to somewhere like 4th and thought it was a pretty good day. But,
that's a great day. I've always wondered about that. It's like the Formula One races. There was one in particular, was it Spa? I can't remember this year, where it was raining and they kept the race on, and the best teams wound up in that one turn, and it just shows you how difficult it is, regardless of what tires you got on that car, to race a lot of these courses in the rain.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And having a year to race in England, it was my first year to race overseas in the Palmer Audi series, which kind of was like Barber Dodge. It was a one-make car series and a grid full of just absolutely diehard, hungry, racers trying to prove themselves, going all around the circuits in England and dealing with a lot of races in the rain. It's what I appreciated about, how the British go racing and the Europeans, they hardly slow down for yellow flags, let alone torrential downpours. So, yeah.
You know what? It kind of reminds me, you and I talked a little bit earlier this week about your involvement in the Ford versus Ferrari movie as a stunt driver, which is awesome. I did not know that. What a great movie, by the way. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Did it resemble racing at all? And then tell us about that rain situation that you shared with me with the listening in.
Sure. Well, yeah, no, I got a call. I got a call to come on to set and be a stunt driver when the Ford versus Ferrari filming had gotten started. This was a couple summers ago, and the first shoot was out at Willow Springs, and I had never met the stunt coordinator. I knew a few of the other stunt drivers on the job. I didn't even know who got me on there, but somehow through somebody who knew me, I got the call, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to continue on past the first few days.
Really?
And yeah, it was just sort of, it was such a big production.
I bet.
With so many people involved that it was kind of just stepping into a little bit of chaos. They needed a lot of drivers. There were a lot of moving parts. But actually, and the stunt coordinator actually thought I was somebody else for the first couple of days. He kept calling me some other guy's name. But finally, once we all got to know each other, which we did fairly quickly, with how much we all depended on each other to get the shots right. I was brought on for the long haul, and it was great. We ended up going after Willow Springs to Atlanta, Georgia, and Savannah, Georgia, and there were so many different locations they utilized to make up the full Le Mans circuit.
No kidding. Yeah, no, I don't think too many people know that. I'm not sure I knew that. So you'd take corners or portions of the racetrack to replicate what Le Mans was like. Huh.
Exactly. And even if you went back to Le Mans to try and shoot an old film, it would be very difficult because of how everything is modernized.
Right.
That they were able to find racetracks and sections of road, like out in Georgia, for instance, that one stretch of road out by Statesboro, Georgia, replicated the Mulsanne Strait. And yeah, here was a guy who lived out in a trailer home out in the middle of nowhere, who all of a sudden had dozens of trucks and the whole Hollywood crew shows up to shoot outside of his property for 3 weeks. It was unbelievable. And then there was an old track we used to race on Hutchinson Island outside of Savannah, a race that I won actually in the Barber Dodge Pro Series.
Wow.
And it's no longer being used for racing, but they found it on their scouting as a way to replicate a lot of the corners. So it was great to go back to a place like that, and with all the weeds growing through the cracks and the track sort of being overgrown and taken back over by the wildlife. But it made, if you've seen the movie, it really looks pretty good, pretty authentic.
Jay, what'd you think of the movie? I know I was pretty way thumbs up on it.
Well, wow, what a fun movie. My dad and I were just saying, we were talking about COVID-19 and its impact on the movie theaters. And while we think that most movies don't need movie theaters anymore, Ford versus Ferrari may have been one of the last great movies you have to see in the theaters. It's as a film buff, there are those movies where only a big screen with a huge surround sound system can do it justice, and that was Ford versus Ferrari.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, they did get lucky. You have to say now, looking in hindsight, that the movie got out there at the end of last year and actually ended up winning a couple Oscars. So
the racing scenes were surprisingly realistic. So tell us a little bit about that. I also want to let you know that it was very interestingly an emotional movie too. I think it touched a lot of hearts. Because, like your dad's story, I mean, he's living check to check. He's not living the fancy Formula One lifestyle that we see on, Sunday these days. It's, you're racing to put food on the table, right? So I just, it was a different time. But tell us about those racing scenes. How realistic was it as a stunt driver?
Well, anyone who's been on a movie set will tell you how unrealistic the whole experience is, because that's just the nature of shooting movies. But saying that, the way that they researched and got the look of the cars right, and went to every absolute length they could to bring that realism out. It was incredible to be a part of. And yeah, as a stunt driver, we were getting in these replica movie cars that would resemble a GT40. I guess the only real car out there was a Porsche 912. We had that one sort of car that was always in the background. We joked calling it the deep background, because somebody had to jump into that car every now and then, and just with the seat that wouldn't stay up, it kept falling. And they'd go out and find, the worst example of one of these that was just barely running, and then shoot it with a new coat of paint to make it look right. But yeah, so it incredibly special, especially to have guys like Alex Gurney, Dan Gurney's son,
Right.
to be on the stunt crew, and he actually had a part playing his father. And then Jeff Bucknam, who is the son of Ronnie Bucknam,
Right.
who I had raced with in the past. Jeff, his dad finished third in that year, 1966. So it was very cool for him to also be a part of the film, and it meant so much to us to see, Hollywood, big budget film focusing on that era, which was so meaningful to our fathers.
So tell us about filming in the rain.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had one of the most impressive sets was out at a private airport in Agua Dulce, which is when you're heading out from LA to the Palmdale Lancaster area. There's a community tucked in the canyons there with a private airport, which the movie production took over for months and months. They built a almost life-size, authentic 60s Le Mans pit lane, which was incredible. The amount of detail they went to.
No kidding.
And so we had to do a lot of night racing scenes there. And because that year at Le Mans, they had a lot of rain during the night and throughout the race, they had these big rain machines that would just, sit up on cranes way above the racetrack. In this case, the runway, and they were, they turn on the rain, and here we had to come blasting by as fast as we could go. And it got to the point where we were all hydroplaning and going, we just don't feel safe going any faster. We were having, a lot of the guys out there, they're tremendously talented. So when those guys are saying, okay, this is not safe, that's when everyone starts to listen. But we were trying to get better rain tires and better this. I think everyone on the movie crew always is trying to shoot for better equipment or better something. But they're keeping us in budget. And ultimately, we just had to slow it down to a pace that was reasonable. And we had the same out in Savannah, Georgia, where that was a lot of fun because we were racing really close to each other. We had to be not only racing really close to one another, but you'll have cameras that are positioned right next to the track, the apex of a corner, or off of a crane that we had to split. So you'd be coming around a corner as fast as you can, and you're watching where your fellow stunt driver is, but you're also having to make sure you don't hit the camera.
It's like you got to hit your mark, but you got to keep your spacing. It's probably how these Blue Angel pilots feel, right? Like,
absolutely. With way less practice, I'll say, for us stunt drivers. But I'll say one of the most stunt driver type experience was out at Road Atlanta when they had this cannon that rolled out, and it was a big semi truck, and on the back they had a pneumatic cannon with a Ferrari 275 GTB, I think it was. It was one of the stock car classes from that era. So it was just the shell of this car that was going to be launched off of a cannon.
What?
And what they were going for was a car that was going to land next to the track and just barrel roll, as you could imagine. And they then had us come down and drive right into it, right into the wreckage. And there was no real idea of what was going to happen. And I happened to be in the first car that it was a green GT40 that arrives on the scene of this crashing Ferrari.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I know. And so I kind of had one of those moments of like, oh, this is getting serious now. And I asked the stunt coordinator, well, what happens when it hits the ground and hits these crash cameras, which are these boxes that are made of metal and hold cameras in them and are meant to take an impact? So once they hit those cameras and they're rolling down the track like a couple of dice, what do you want me to do? And the stunt coordinator said, well, hit them like squirrels. He's like, do what you do. And I thought, wow, okay, so, the first take, car launches off the cannon, gets on its wheels, and it shoots across the track and hits the barrier on the other side. I'm meanwhile trying to avoid this rolling dummy car, and I'm off on the side of the track in the wet grass, and I have a tire wall coming at me in like 100 feet, and I'm going pretty quick, so I'm about to have a pretty big wreck in this faux GT40, and I'm doing everything I can to just get the car out of that almost ditch. And I just nail the gas, and I go spinning across the track backwards, right in front of these other Porsche 906 movie cars. And the second unit director was watching all this, and he said, "Man, that was great. He loved it." Yeah, cut. We got the shot.
Done. Right, it's a wrap.
Right.
Thank you. That was outstanding. Thanks for sharing that story. And wow, it just shows you that even under the most controlled circumstance, and it's still racing.
It is. And I think it's good, for people to know it's not all CGI. Of course, they do a lot of visual effects to plug in the gaps. And you just can't put a film out there nowadays without some sort of visual effects. But, in the roots of making this film was so much realism and real shots, real driving shots. And that's what made it so special.
Well, that's why I think we all enjoyed it so much. Hey, this is kind of I'm just bringing this up. It's somewhat of a sidebar, but it's selfish. We've got a 355 Ferrari here in our storage facility. It's a 1999. Is that one of the cars that you drove, a 355 Ferrari in one of your series?
I did.
That car is so 90s cool. We started up. It sounds like a Ferrari. It looks like a Ferrari in some parts. In other parts, it looks like a 90s car. It's got that wedge look. But tell us about driving a 355 Ferrari.
Well, the 355 was such a great car to drive, and in fact, that was early on in my racing career. I was fortunate enough to get involved with the dealership up in LA at Ferrari of Beverly Hills, for them in a way to sponsor me to drive. I know it's primarily a owner driver series, and I certainly wasn't showing up with my own Ferrari 355. But in fact, I had done the whole racing season in the. This is embarrassing. You got to edit it out. But it was the Ferrari. It was such a lousy car. I can't remember the name of it. What was the predecessor to it? The 348. Sorry, 348. 348.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I think you're right. I think 348.
And I think everyone, even at Ferrari, would agree. It wasn't the best of their models, the 348. But I raced in the 348 Challenge throughout the season, 1996, and it was a difficult car. It had its limitations. You'd get these snap oversteers. You'd get some terrifying moments. But at the end of the year, I was I had finished runner-up in that, and I was invited to Mugello, Italy, for the Ferrari Challenge runoffs. And there I got to drive a Ferrari 355, and my first laps in one were timed laps. It was like a timed competition with all the other drivers at Fiorano at Ferrari's test circuit. And that was probably one of the most awesome experiences of my life.
I was going to say, how cool was that?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And the 355 was such a big improvement in handling, just the general feel of the car. I felt like I had paid my dues driving, its predecessor, because now you got in a car that you could really confidently hustle around. It's a car, actually, I'd love to own. A 355, because it's just it still has that sort of simplicity of a Ferrari that you can shift without all the electronic aids and all of it. Anyone who's looking for some fun with an older Ferrari, what a great car.
Yeah, Jay, you love that 355 Ferrari, right? You're ready to get yourself one of these days, right?
Yeah, man. Who's got $1 million lying around?
$1 million?
Nah, I'm messing with you.
That's the beauty of them. I don't think it costs a
Nah.
whole lot for a 355. I'm not sure what they're going for these days,
No, I
but
think that they were probably going for maybe like 200, 300?
No, it's 75, 80 grand.
Even less?
80 grand getting you in one, Jay.
80,
Yeah.
90? Really?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, huh?
Get them before they go.
Why
through
was I
the
thinking
world.
of a different one? You know what? It shows that I just have ADD about these things. So I was like, oh wait, 355. Oh yeah, we got one of those in the shop. Yeah, that's a good little entry level one. I'd buy one.
right. I mean, we're not talking an F50 or anything like that.
Removes egg from face.
Well, luckily you're the editor. You can do whatever you want with that.
That's
Yeah,
great.
right. Yeah.
My
I have the
suggestion,
power. Close the beaches.
my suggestion is we leave this in.
Oh no. Yeah.
Not so sure. So, speaking.
It's called honesty, Dad. That's what you taught me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best kind of content.
It is.
It really is. It's
But I'm with you. I'm with you, Jay. I generally do not know the values of these cars. I don't want to know the value of these cars that I don't feel I can readily get into and drive because I only feel I'm setting myself up for disappointment. You know?
Good perspective.
Sure. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So-
Right. Ignorance is bliss, as they say.
It is sometimes.
Yeah, you were also got involved in an ad campaign for General Motors in the 2012-13 era, I believe, with Cadillac's ATS. Was that like stunt driving? How much different is that than doing stunt driving in a movie? Is it some of the same kind of stuff, or were you more of a product expert? Tell us about that experience.
So I get a call from Jeff Swart, a car commercial director I'd met while I was racing in Europe a few years before, who I had since met up with in Aspen and gone on this insane backcountry snowmobiling trip. And it's a few years later when I get a call from him, and out of the blue, he asked me if I could be available for a car commercial being shot in Monaco, a circuit I had raced a couple times. He said I might be getting a call from an ad agency. Well, I got the call, and they had me go in for a casting interview and to meet with the people from the agency, a company called Fallon out of Minnesota. And I guess they liked me because I got the call that, hey, you're going to be on the road for 2.5 months, and you can't tell anyone where you're going. You can't do any social media, and we're going to be going to 4 different continents and shooting 8 car commercials. And oh my God, the pressure was enormous. Because it wasn't just precision driving or stunt driving like the nameless person behind the wheel. They wanted it to be about the personalities, about us being on a real adventure. And when I say us, it was me and this other guy, Ross Thomas, who was kind of the adventurer sidekick who would be in the car with me everywhere we would go.
Rob Thomas, famous singer. That's pretty cool. I didn't know he could drive cars.
I hope I said Ross.
No,
with S's.
you did. I was trying to make.
That was good. But I thought I maybe said it wrong. Yeah, it was not Rob Thomas. I would have loved that, but he was unfortunately on tour during this. But yeah, no, we had an unbelievable journey, and it was really, really one of the biggest challenges I've ever had in my life, because you did get the feeling that they could say at any moment, thank you very much. Yeah, you can go home now. Because the amount of money they were putting into it, the first location was down almost at the bottom of the world. We were in Chile, down by the Patagonia region. And from there, we went off to France for Monaco. And then we were in Morocco, and then we had to fly to China and do these incredible roads in China. So it was probably one of the greatest gigs I've ever gotten in my life, and boy did I have to learn quickly in order to not get fired.
What a great experience from a life story perspective. These we like to talk, or Jason and I talk about this notion of building blocks in life, and your story, your building blocks are so unique, and these opportunities are presented to you because of your background and your experience. And pretty soon you're in a situation like this. You're in the jungle of Chile, and you're doing this incredible thing, and you're like, God, how did I get here? It's just amazing. So we're so excited for those stories. But hey, one thing we want to get to before we go is you wrote an incredible biography, if you will, and maybe that's not the right way to put it, but a book, volume of books for about your father's life, Inside Track or Inside Tracks, and tell us a little bit about that as well as this next undertaking that you briefly mentioned to me. That's a documentary about his life, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So, when my father was still alive, he passed away in 2008. In the last, I'd say, sort of 4 or 5 years of his life, we decided to really dig into these photographs. A friend of ours from Orange County, a photographer named Steve Dawson, always a big fan of motor racing from that era, and a friend of my father's. Worked with my father to dig out all these old 35 millimeter slides out of the closet that my father just had sitting in those Kodak boxes. He'd break them out from time to time to give a talk to a group of car enthusiasts, or sometimes he'd show them. We'd have sort of the family slideshow and get to see some of these, but we decided they really needed to be put into a book because they were photographs that he took during his career as a racing driver, and they were all shot in color Kodachrome, and so these shots are from the mid 1950s through the early 1960s. Just told a story about his career as a racing driver, and such interesting, unique behind the scenes photographs. And so we got all the stories behind these photographs. We compiled it. There was so much content there that we decided to turn it into a 3-volume book. Doug Nye, who's an author, a well-known motorsports author out of England, took on the project along with Paul Vesti and the GP Library to publish this book. And it was a massive undertaking, and the book has won multiple awards. It's still for sale. It's called Inside Track. In fact, you could find it at philhillbook.com, and it's got a little bit of a hefty price tag, but it's a real legacy book. And for anyone who's interested in that era, it is such a deep dive, so to speak, of so many aspects of what that era of the Le Mans 24 hours, Formula One racing, sports car racing all around the world is all about. And it was great to see it all come together. And I, in the meantime, I decided after my father passed away that this was a whole generation of people that were going to be passing away, and along with that, all the stories. And so I got myself a camera. I did a crash course in filming, lighting, all of it. And I went to Italy and I interviewed as many of the people as I could that were still around from my father's era at Ferrari, friends of his and drivers he raced with, such as Carroll Shelby and Sterling Moss. And I'm putting together a documentary about my father's career as becoming the first American to win the world championship.
I can't wait for that. We're going to get that Inside Track book or 3 volumes here as a coffee table for our SoCal Classic Car Storage, and we're so excited about this documentary that you're putting together to celebrate the incredible life that your father had and the impact he's made on the car world, the racing world. Just what a legacy. And, it must feel pretty special to be responsible for keeping the legacy alive of your father. So incredible story, how important it is for people to take on that responsibility and celebrate the past. The guy.
Well, thanks. Your facility down there would be perfect place for these volumes to be browsed through. I think it's something every car lover, even people who aren't into racing, could appreciate what they're all about. And I appreciate what you have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being an amazing guest today. You are outstanding, Eric. We gained some tremendous insight into your story, your father's story, and your current life trajectory. It's what a great life. I just want to say thank you, and then I'll turn it over to Jay.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and Derek, you got any social that budding fans or interested people can find you?
Well, I can be found on Facebook, and my Instagram handle is at Derek Hill 28.
Great. Yeah, well, you heard it here, Derek Hill 28 on Instagram. Go check that out. You can also find us on Instagram at the SoCal Car Scene. You can also find us on Facebook under the same handle. So go over there, give us a like, give us a follow, and you can see all the updates that we have here on the podcast and other news from around the SoCal Car Scene. Thank you so much, Derek Hill, for stopping by. You were listening to me, Jason Marash, the technical director and executive producer of the SoCal Car Scene podcast. And you were listening to host Dean Marash, who is also the owner of SoCal Classic Car Storage, which this show is sponsored by. So come visit us here in our Laguna Hills location, or go visit us at SoCalCarStorage.com. And you can check out more episodes of the podcast at SoCalCarStorage.com/media. This is Jason Marash once again. Thank you so much for stopping by. We care about you. We're praying about you. We're hoping the best for your health and your family's health. So just stay safe out there and happy driving.
All right. All right. All right. All right.